Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. I hope that you are doing well. And in today's training, I want to talk about how you can make that switch from employee to entrepreneur. Now, I've been speaking to a lot of people about making that shift, and I've actually created a whole program all about accelerating from becoming an employee to becoming an entrepreneur because it is a bit of a transition, and it's really important to acknowledge that it is a big switch going from corporate or your 9 to 5 and going out at starting your own business, whatever it might be, or side hustling. It is a big transition. So I wanted to go live and give you some some of my trainings and my recollections on how it was different for me, okay? And what really is the difference between an employee and an entrepreneur. So one of the main difference is that an employee would think along the lines of, I'm afraid, so therefore I'm going to conform to what is expected of me, right? So I'm afraid, so I must conform. An entrepreneur, however, has to think that my fear fuels me, okay? Being fearful as an entrepreneur is definitely, it's going to happen. And actually, I always say this: when you are scared, it probably means that you're going to go up the next level. And so being an employee means that you're part of a system, right? And let's be very real. It's not most often being part of a system also means being part of a certain way of doing things, right? It may be how it's done in your company or in your department or even in your group, which also implies a certain underlying sense of fear for those who don't conform. But we don't admit the fear often enough to start realizing what it makes us do. All right. So being an entrepreneur means first and foremost admitting that fear is definitely involved and doing it anyway. Feeling the fear and doing it anyway. It for those who are side hustling, it's to use the fear as energy to create more, work harder, and innovate more, right? So fear is a good thing. Entrepreneurs must see fear as a good thing. Another mindset of an employee is that mistakes are not a good thing. It's a bad thing. An entrepreneur, however, has to think that my mistakes allow me to succeed. Or in how I think Google or Facebook or some tech company calls it, fail fast, right? The more mistake you make as an employee, there's probably that fear of I'm going to get fired, right? Mistakes are not very popular in a conventional world of business because they're seen as costing money, time, and energy. So we see them as bad and try as much as possible to actually run away from them. But as an entrepreneur, you have to look at mistakes as valuable lessons, as valuable data. They are just data that you need to eventually get to where you want to be, right? You need to learn from your mistakes and learn from them that you can improve and get better. Okay, so another thing, and this is for my CEOs out there who's been sliding into my DMs and been asking about hiring and who do I hire, and I'm really scared, all these fears in their head, and I'm always telling them, nothing is guaranteed in life, nothing is guaranteed in business, and being an employee, you have this mindset of when you take risks, it's I seek security. I am not taking no risk, right? Security means I'm not taking any no risk. I'm just gonna do what my manager tells me, blah 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 blah. Right? As an entrepreneur, as a remarkable CEO, because I know you're all remarkable, it's all about taking calculated risks. That is what is security in the business world. Okay, it's not a steady paycheck and a reliable pension, whatever 401k if you're in the US. I don't even know what it is in the UK. Employment is all about, not taking no risks, because obviously your employer would have to take that risk. The company that you're working for will take that risk and reap all of its rewards pretty much while you're doing the work. Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, you have to just take calculated risks, and if it works out, hey ho, all of the good stuff come to you, right? Because it's all on you. You get all of the revenue, you get all the success, right? Another thing that I always preach is that as an employee, right, you're always trying to do certification after certification. You're probably, I don't know, you have to do, if you're an accountant or a doctor, you have to do lots of qualifications, all of that stuff. Fair enough. You have this mentality that you have to know it all. But that's not the case. As an entrepreneur, you have to always be thinking, I'm constantly learning. Entrepreneurs are constant learners, whereas there's often an implicit requirement as employees to know everything, or at least pretend that you do, of course. It's important that as remarkable CEOs, you start shifting your mindset to one where you're not afraid to admit that you don't know everything, one where you're open to actually constantly learning. Like I said, running a business is like being this data driven person. You just have to get the data and iterate and figure out how to do things better. And you don't know what you don't know, right? So you're going to have to make mistakes. See how all of this mind shifts all tie in together and they're all important in succeeding as an employee. Oh, sorry, as an entrepreneur. Another thing that's a mind shift between an employee and an entrepreneur, right? An employee probably has this mentality that they have to be the smartest person in the room, which is just not true. It's this thing that's always, I always hated in corporate life. There's always someone wanting to impress the boss by like stealing your idea and sharing it and all of that. An entrepreneur, right, have to be the person to surround themselves with people who are smarter than them. They have to really join the mastermind, join the groups, attend that conference, right? And this is so important. I've just recently invested myself in a 5-figure mastermind, not necessarily for the content, right? The training content and all of that that's given to me, but for the people that I'm going to meet. I always say it's like when you choose to go to the most highly kind of prestigious university, you don't necessarily go because it's the best, located in the best area of town or the country. Sometimes it's because you are going to meet the best people. You're going to build up the best network when you go to that university. It's the same thing with masterminds. So as an entrepreneur, you really have to be a connector. You really have to learn how to network and get to know people. And another thing that I love is that as an employee, you're always kind of looking at how people perceive you in their perception and how to look good on the outside, right? As an entrepreneur and as a CEO of your own business, you have to really look inward, right? You have to have a deep internal shift based on faith on yourself and a commitment to always better yourself. I was listening to a podcast recently and it was so interesting. Someone kept quoting that all entrepreneurs are basically personal development junkies, right? We're always constantly trying to better ourselves and go to the next level and always be good and always look how to be a good leader, especially when you're a CEO. And one of my favorite things is, and I'm learning how to do this right now as well. Everyone is, because employees tend to have the mindset that the goal is the next promotion, right? The next salary and all of that. An entrepreneur has to think the goal is the journey, right? The journey. It's not just the performance reviews. It's not just your key performance indicators. You have to notice that the goals are that in entrepreneurial life, it's the journey, it's the process of itself, right? It's one that is built upon each achievement, and some of it might be quote unquote failures, and some may be lesson learned, right? So I want to leave you today with this really quick, just the way the training in itself is just, I want you to start documenting what sort of mindset that you have, whether that be a mindset blocks, whether that be I don't know, like sometimes a lot of entrepreneur CEOs come to me and they're so scared of making a decision. But once you realize that entrepreneurship is a process and that making mistakes, maybe trying something new and then for it having a different outcome to what you thought it would be, right? It's all part of the journey. It's all part of the process, and you have to trust the process. And it's so much fun when you start to look at your entrepreneurial journey that way. Trusting in a process, continuing to develop yourself, continuing to pursue internal goals and looking inward rather than outwards for gratification. That's what's important, and respecting that, if you're going away from corporate life to entrepreneurship, there will be a huge transition. You will have to think things through differently, right? You have to make these shifts that I've just mentioned. So I hope that you've enjoyed this training. If you haven't met me yet, my name is Pauline Malabai and I'm a founder of Pauline Malabai Consulting. And I went from grappling with imposter syndrome and anxiety in the corporate world to now becoming the CEO of my own thriving online business. And I lead and develop an agency of really talented individuals. And we offer our 6-7 figure remarkable CEOs with everything, with strategy, advisory, and implementation support. Also, I've just created an accelerator program for people just like you, probably transitioning from corporate, maybe a side hustler, trying to piece the pieces together, right? Of how to crack this business world, becoming an entrepreneur. It is hard. I will tell you that it's hard. You can do your way, DIY your way, trying to figure it out yourself, or you can join a network, a community of people where you get expert advice and you get me as your sister, as your mentor, and it's a lot of fun. So I hope you've enjoyed this workshop and I will see you in our next training. Bye for now.